Hello and a warm Collisions. Welcome to my returning guest. I'm very excited to always have a good conversation with Ms. Lauren Dwyer. How are you doing, Lauren?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Tyler.
Thanks for coming back on the show. I look back, episode 330, so it feels like forever ago, but I think that's just a factor of time and the cliche. It doesn't seem to be moving slower, especially in the world of what we're going to talk about today around AI, ... So you are assistant professor at Mount Royal University in information design. So give us a quick, for anyone who didn't have a chance, go back episode 330, go search it on Collisions. You want to get a little more of the backstory because we're going to delve into maybe the nuts and bolts more today. But give us a little bit, what's your role? You know, what blows your hair back these days in terms of being an assistant professor? And we'll jump off from there.
Yeah, so I think the last time I was on the show, I was an academic chair at SAIT for the Artificial Intelligence and Data Analytics programs and portfolio, which was great, but was very much a management position. And when I got the opportunity to switch into a more research and teaching-based like professorship role, I jumped on it just because this is absolutely my dream job, right? So I'm tenure track at Mount Royal. I get to study information design, which is this wonderful blend of communication studies meets technology meets how are we actually framing things and putting them out into the world meets design, right? And it's a phenomenal space. So right now I just taught in the winter, I was teaching tools for information designers and designing for interactivity. And now in the fall, I'll be teaching usability and qualitative research methods. So getting to do lots of the stuff that I love in terms of teaching, but then on the research side of things, I'm getting to look news and journalism and how potentially AI can impact this area, but also what the ethics look like in this area. And if there is really a code, which there are unofficial ones, but is there anything that we can actually make tangible? And then looking at behavior modification, which is going to be what I start jumping into pretty deeply in the fall and how technology can impact behavior. So that's kind of what's keeping me going right now.
So many places to go. Thinking about I always like to bring it down to kind of nuts and bolts for a minute. Like the students that are going through your programs doing information design, they're going to take that and do what? Design the things we interact with on our phones. Like I'm thinking about experience design. I'm thinking of product design. Am I lumping those in correctly from a perspective of all the things and ways we interact with the world around us, especially the digital world around us?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, our students are incredibly talented. I'm so lucky. My first two groups of students that I had in the winter were just phenomenal. Really, really cool kids with really big ideas. Most of them are from their internships right now, and I get to see them again in the fall. So I'm excited to see how they've grown and changed and shifted their ideas. But yes, you're absolutely correct. They're doing things in the realm of UX, UI, communications on a different level. Like we're not talking about people who are going to necessarily be like social media managers. We're talking about people who are going to shape the actual design of the technology, but also the information that we interact with, right? So
both kind of the product, if you will, as well as then where the information is then delivered or disseminated
exactly
on those platforms. So getting into it's so easy to forget that, we interact so easily and seamlessly on our phones. Someone designed every step of that journey, right? Mm-hmm.
Yes. And also they'll be doing things like learning design and instructional design and different shit. So like they have so many different options and paths. And that's part of the reason I just fell in love with this program. But I get to take them down that research and usability path, which is my favorite place to kind of play in.
Well, and for you from a psychology, because you have a psychology background, it's so easy to think, in the old days, well, we had the human sciences over here and then we had the hard technical. Now it feels like it's such a blurry world of like, you still really have to understand your user to then really optimize that experience for them, whether that be how they learn to how we order our products seamlessly online.
Yeah,
it can be used for all sorts of executions, which is what I'm really hearing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
I recently attended adult night at the Science Center, which was a ton of fun. So a friend of mine reached out. She's like, "Oh, let's go, let's do it." And I did not realize, but I got there and saw you on the bill. I was like, "Oh, this is amazing!" So you had a really fun talk that evening on so many levels. But the one thing that really triggered me to reach out and go, Lauren, can we do another podcast? Was you talked about the concept of agency, specifically getting into AI. And I know it was a big jump, like we're talking about experience design and all the things that go with that, to this reality of we've got this thing impacting all levels or aspects of what you just talked about, which is AI. And then who is in charge here? Who's running this asylum? Who's driving the bus? Pick your metaphor. So I wanted to dig in a little bit around that because you really presented it in a way that I thought often seems to be skipped over as the media headlines run quickly to point, AI did this, AI did that. But your concept around agency of like, well, who's behind that and who's the person pulling the strings? I will stop talking and turn it over to you to maybe kind of expand and explore on the idea that you presented that night.
Yeah, and to contextualize, so like this was a part of Spark After Dark's AI night, which was the most fun, and I was so excited to be a part of. But my presentation was, I think it was like Beyond Computation, AI, Communication, and Society. But specifically the part that you're talking about, I had pulled up basically different pieces of explanatory journalism news articles talking about how we discuss artificial intelligence. And of course, this is after contextualizing what is it, what isn't it, but why this matters and why how we talk about it matters was my key piece here. So artificial intelligence, when we look at news articles around it, and I challenge anyone who's currently listening to just Google AI right now and just AI in the news, anything in particular, and see who the main actor is or who has agency in the headline of the articles that come up. Because quite often you'll see things like Google does this, or AI does this, or AI has impacted this, but you're not necessarily, there's no person's name, there's no engineer's name, and quite often the company's name is not framed as the actor. It's right. AI is the actor. So Google's AI did this, or OpenAI's XYZ.
Is that, would you say, even though somewhat in between, of at least saying it's Google's AI versus just starting with, because you could drop that off and just say AI did this. Is there still a degree of like, are we playing the line by even including?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
It is about nuance in this context, right? Mm-hmm.
It's incredibly nuanced. Like I think as soon as you start talking about advancing technology and advanced technology, especially artificial intelligence that changes every 15 seconds or however fast you want to say, like there is no black and white. There is only gray, which is interesting. Anyway, so when we look at who actually has the agency to do these things, it's particularly interesting when you look at things that have gone really well and things that have gone really poorly. So, for example, Tesla's Cybertruck did XYZ. So-and-so's self-driving car did XYZ. We're willing to place blame on a company or a person when it's done something extraordinary, positive or negative. But you can typically tell the direction that it's going to go based on how we framed the person in charge. And I bring this up in particular because when you think about artificial intelligence and the things that it's impacted, let's take an example of a self-driving car. So a self-driving car recently hit someone on a crosswalk in China. This is obviously tragic. Who is behind the decision-making process that the AI went through that led to it hitting the person? Is it a company who did the coding, who did the training, who did the data? Like the further you go back through that chain of responsibility, the harder it becomes to dissect. And the more you realize there is still a group of people that are behind all of the decisions that eventually were made. So when you get into the legal ramifications of some of the things that artificial intelligence is doing, and obviously like it's very easy to see, here's a consequence, a self-driving car that was using computer vision, which is artificial intelligence, hit a person. That is an obvious consequence. What we're not necessarily seeing is the obvious consequence of behavior being modified and people changing the way that they act, the things that they buy, the news that they read, the votes that they make. We're not seeing that necessarily as directly correlated to the people who are designing the artificial intelligence, because it's harder to draw that through line than it is to draw the line between a person got hit, right? So it's evaluating the end metrics and looking back and back and back and back to try and see, okay, but who was behind the actual training, the collection of the data, the decision-making processes that the artificial intelligence was trained to make? Who did all of this? Who was in power? Because those folks aren't necessarily having their names in the headlines.
Interesting. And we've got the role of media and how the media presents it. And then we've also got where so much of our society and the way things are structured is because of legality and who's accountable and like who can we sue, especially in North America, especially in the US. Who do we sue? The board of directors because they're ultimately responsible for the actions of their organization, versus how the media is portraying the AI as good or evil, good or bad, because that's a very convenient way to pump a headline.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's like, yeah, in North America, we're particularly litigious. Like
Yeah.
that's one way to look at it. Um, but then also in Canada, we are so behind on regulation.
Mm.
It's a free for all, and with new technology and with upcoming elections and with shifting political structures and landscapes, chances are we aren't going to have government regulation for new technology for quite a while
No,
yet.
based on the timeline of our next election, there's nothing new like that getting introduced in the short term, unless it's really going to appeal to some group of voters. Let's be honest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even then, like we're, with the timelines that it does take to get through this major, bureaucratic system, it basically puts the responsibility of regulation and of ethics back on the organizations themselves and back on the industry, which I would love to say industry is phenomenal at regulating itself. But that would be probably one of the biggest bold-faced lies I could tell, right? Because at the end of the day, which is going to propel industries are going to be peddling to your stakeholders and making sure that they actually are receiving additional capital or regulation. And quite often
I
those
think
two,
we know which way that's
yeah,
going to lean. Yeah, and you even talked
exactly.
about. So let's go back to the autonomous vehicle running over a pedestrian in China.
Mhm.
You've got a world that's less litigious. You've got a company behind that that's probably state owned, or to some degree, everything is state owned to a certain degree in China, right? And then you've got a country that maybe looks at the human as an individual in maybe a different way than we do. So like, is it even going to be not only the headline, but what change might happen, or collateral damage? I guess that test didn't work out. Someone got it. We'll just keep moving forward. Like just thinking about also where that occurred and how that's even going to be framed by that society. Because we're looking at it, I'm looking at it with my North American lens, which probably is not accurate. Like my first fail is I'm using my filters.
No, exactly. And I have no way of predicting the direction that would take. 'Cause again,
Fair
I'm
enough.
looking at this very much through.
Lauren, you are my expert. You
So
have the answers to everything right now. You do know that, right?
I know very little about anything ever, but
Well, we all know that's not true, but I appreciate I appreciate your well-positioned humility.
yeah.
Mhm. So how, in the role that you're in, and I'm sure you have the next generation of these innovators and creators in your classroom.
Mhm.
So how is that narrative kind of picking up from like, here's where we are now and this is what's happening? And you made a comment like AI, if we're changing every 15 seconds, while we have a regulatory framework that maybe changes every few years. I can't even put a number to that. One is slow, one is fast, but yet coming back to, there's still somebody creating that experience, someone behind the code, someone behind the data set, someone who filtered whether the computer vision even recognized that as a person because maybe their gender or their race didn't match what data set they were programmed on. Like that's how weird it gets really quick. So when you're in class and you're educating a group of young, enthusiastic, big idea students, how do you balance that? Because they're the next layer, or they're the next first line, they're the best line of defense on how this gets done differently the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, this is the space where I think like I've struggled a lot with this because again, like as someone who's working within this field, there is an obvious, I wouldn't say fear, but extraordinarily caution around, the technology that's coming and the direction that this can go. So I feel like this is actually the area I can make the biggest impact is potentially with my students. And if they're not going to be held necessarily to a regulatory framework, they're not going to be held to any rules saying they have to do this. The one thing I can instill in them, or at least try, I will not pretend that I can get a group of, 19-year-olds to all actually shape the direction that their
We're
life is
talking about
going.
influence versus hardline direction. Yes, I understand the difference.
Yeah. Great. But I think the thing that I'm able to do at least is impart upon them the necessary need and like the way that they have to participate in digital citizenship and good digital citizenship and responsibility. So we do activities in class where they have free reign, but then they have to swap what their project was with another student so that they can say, okay, well, this was the impact it had on this person when they were a user. And we do, yes, user testing, and user testing is important and usability is important, but users aren't the only stakeholders when you look at a product. So if you're designing, even if it's you're designing an app for a person who is struggling with physical mobility issues, so they can report, say, different areas where different, say, like different accessibility things are down. Here, okay. There you go. It's reporting. I'm using an example that a student had done. Well, yes, that's going to impact, obviously, the person who needs the accessibility thing. So say your wheelchair button is down, it's not working. It's also going to impact the person who's running to class late with 2 coffees in their hands, their books over there, and they can't hit the button, so they can't get the door open. Like, it impacts so many people. And so one of the examples that we use is that accessible design and responsible design isn't just good, and I'm using air quotes, for the people that you think it's being designed for. It's actually good for everyone and is generally best practice. And when you're doing accessible and design, and when you're doing design that's actually really solid and good for one specific group, it oftentimes also just makes it better for everyone in general, which broadens your user group, which broadens the number of people who will purchase and or use your product, which actually ends up being a good business decision. So my direction that I take is being a good human, or at least thinking about more people besides yourself, it isn't just an accessibility or tick a box or does this fit DEI. It's actually a really good business choice and something that's what I'm trying to instill in them so that they have another angle to approach it with. So when they become interns or, low level, like first year in their jobs, folks, like when they get out into industry, they can say, hey, I noticed we're not doing this. I think we should, not just for the reasons of being good human beings and actually fitting within this regulatory framework that doesn't exist, but also because it is a good business decision. So it's instilling those lessons in them as well, so that they are actually armed with the argument when they go out into industry.
I love that. How critical, or I guess, to think beyond. I have a user and I'm thinking about the use case, but that example you said of someone who has is in a wheelchair and the button doesn't work in the door, but yet someone else who's now got their hands full of books and 2 coffees, how challenging is it? Because humans, I find, we tend to put blinders on. This is our customer. This is their problem. We focus on it. So from a nuanced perspective, and this can apply to all of us in any role in any organization, as you're solving one problem, how do you lift your head up enough to realize you're over? Just ideas or concepts around how do you train us? I use the royal we to be better at that, because I find we're really good at focusing, sometimes not good at broadening up our views.
Yeah. And this is where I have what I call my hottest take in design. This is my hot take. And it's every single time I see an organization or a company using a persona, I discount the entire thing that they're doing. It's useless. Okay. It's garbage.
Lauren's hot takes.
I hate personas.
First of all, I just love that you have hot takes, and we're going to use that now.
I have so many hot takes. But my hot take is that personas are bullshit. Pardon me for the language here, but it's facts. The personas have no space in good design. And I'm sure someone is going to be able to argue that, and there's going to be designers out there who are like, you're wrong. And I mean, even designers in my faculty, and you know what? They're probably right, and they have more experience in those areas. Absolutely. But when it comes to a persona is inherently an assumption. Mm-hmm. And assumptions don't necessarily help us when we do good research. Good research involves a wide swath of our target audience. Yes, we can have a target audience, but a target audience and a persona are not necessarily the same thing. I have an unfortunate example of this, and I won't name drop the company, but it was a god-awful experience where I sat in a room with myself, one other a researcher who at the time was my mentor. And she's just incredible. And a group of, I would say, 6 or 7 high-ranking men at this very, very large international, big company, where we were looking at a social robot that would help women with dermatology, or help people with dermatology in a cancer clinic. So the robot would be there and be like, hey, wear sunscreen, it would talk to you. So they were trying to come up with who the target audience would be that this robot would talk to. And they decided the target audience, and based on what, I'm not sure, but they decided that their target audience was going to be women between the ages of 40 and 55. And they were going to be this. And then they started just pulling out all of these things that this woman would need and would want to do. The only women in the room were myself and my supervisor, my mentor. And we were not consulted. And every assumption they made was wrong. To the point where oh, well, women would do this. And we're both there well, no, we wouldn't. And oftentimes when personas are created, the actual parties themselves aren't consulted. So when you come up with this idea of, oh, this is the person who's going to use my product, there is no one person who's going to look the way you think they look, whether that be in action or in physical ability or in perspective. And so that's why like personas themselves, they absolutely kill me. When you have the real users out there, you could contact them and do a user study. So this is where, and that's where I think UX plays this huge role, where people are actually doing usability research and they're actually saying like, okay, when you use this, how does this work for you? And what is your feedback? And there is no replacement for that, especially in the form of an assumption made in the form of a persona. So this is why I hate personas. Sorry, that was a tangent, but it was
lovely because it circles all the way back to, we're now using AI, we're giving it agency to make decisions in our life, having no idea where those data sets come from and what biases or assumptions were baked into it. Like, I think that that was I think that easily circled back on itself.
Wonderful.
You know, and there's lots of stories out there of like, oh, we made crash test dummies to fit a certain body type that happened to be male. We put a data set into the computer that thought this. So then when it identified images, like there's so many stories if you listen to the history of it. And now we're building so much on top of that.
Well, even
how
with
cleansed has that
ChatGPT,
become, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like even with ChatGPT, what data set was that trained on? And it was the internet. And the internet is not a good place. If you spend more than 5 minutes
the swamp that is the internet, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the kind of direction I like to take it, is like when you're using these large language models and you know that they've been trained on large data sets that can involve access to the internet, please recognize they have access to Reddit. And do you trust everyone on Reddit? No. Just in the same way that I made the example of, like you're driving, when the people were driving to the science center, did they trust every single person they passed on Deerfoot because their data was used? So, that's the typical thing.
One might argue, and I'm not going to, one might not either, that the internet is a pretty good snapshot of how nuts we all are. And that's a real broad sweeping statement. So at the lack of, okay, let's take a cross-section of all the rights, wrongs, lefts, rights, good, bads, whatever. What data set then would be, like, if you're trying to think about the scale that something like ChatGPT operates on, and that does give us a perspective on questions and random things that we ask, who gets to choose what's right and what's wrong or what's good or what's bad? Which, the internet somewhat self-regulates while also being a bit of a cesspool. I'm just trying to understand what the alternative would be and how it could look better without somebody somewhere putting their bias into that data.
I don't think it's possible to have unbiased data.
Okay. So
I'll
let's just put that right on the table. Okay.
Yeah, it's not possible to have data that is unbiased because every single perspective is different, and that could be with people, but also with technology. You set a camera up at 2 different angles, you're getting 2 different perspectives.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Okay.
And what it becomes is then who decided where to put the cameras, right? So it's everything has a degree.
Who decided which set of photos to delete and which set to keep? Like, there's so many layers to it, right?
And the lens, like there's so many choices that go into things. And what AI is basically just a decision matrix, right? It's like, and it makes those choices. So I don't have the right answer or any real answer here. I can just acknowledge that there is space to be critical, and we should be critical of the things that are coming out of it, especially when you've got, different AI models that are saying, to make your pizza gooier, add glue. Or, you know what I mean? Like that's
rocks to make it crunchy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So how do we battle back to being citizens who are on this journey? Mm-hmm. We are so quick to believe, like it's built into us to go like, oh, like I feel like you have to work extra hard to be ever vigilant and ever be discriminatory about what you're reading and what you're believing. Yet I've often, the reality of why we fall for scams and why we believe things. It's so part of our, like, it feels like a tug of war back to just the human agent in the middle of all this.
And it's gonna get getting even harder because
it's gonna get worse.
I know it's gonna get it's already so bad. Yeah, when you're on any form of social media, what you're seeing, you didn't choose. It's completely tailored to keep you on the app for longer or to work some capitalistic purpose, right? Like you are going to
if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. We've all heard that, and it's not wrong, right?
And you're not even the product. Your choices
are. Ooh, nice.
Like it's not even you. Like they don't necessarily care about you, the human. They care about the choices you make because it shapes and it forms this sphere of influence. And the biggest influencer out there was an algorithm that you didn't even know existed, right? And that's on social media, but it's also on search engines. in Google, even in Bing, right? Like in whatever you're choosing in the directions you take. It's in, and we've seen this. This is not new. This is not exclusive to the internet. You know what I mean? Like this is, and in marketing, like you understand this completely, and this is everywhere. It's just that it's become so intertwined with our everyday interactions that it becomes one thing. So what can we do to maintain a degree of agency, short of moving to a cabin in the woods?
Which is not off the table. That's not off the table.
I need to stress it is absolutely not off the table. I did a wonderful hike a couple weekends ago, and I was just like, this is actually the life for me, until I ran into a mama bear and her two cubs. And then I was like, maybe I'm not cut out for this.
You just have to respect that you're in their backyard. They're not in yours. That's my motto when I go out there. I'm like, just remember whose backyard you're actually in. I just get part-time access here. This is where they live.
Yeah. Oh, I hightailed it out of there. My dog was like, nope, not for me. But so short of moving to the mountains, and disconnecting completely and burying your phone in the backyard and breaking your sim,
putting on your tinfoil hat.
Exactly. Short of all of that, it's taking the 30 seconds out of your day to fact check the decisions that you're making. You look something up. So say you're looking at,
but where do you fact check though? So because we've all heard that do your research.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. But
problematic.
Then people yeah, because you end up searching those same places that you always trust and always go to.
Of course.
Take two sources. Get two sources from widely different areas. If you see a commonality, it looks like we have a commonality. I'm not necessarily saying it will be true, but at least you have multiple perspectives.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things that I look for is, where can I find this? Can I find this in multiple different places? What are multiple different places and people saying about things? I look at it from trying to find journalists in journalism that falls dead center. So you can look up what bias does this journal have? Looking for ones on both sides, not just the ones that are dead down the middle, because there's no such freaking thing. And trying to see where you actually are. And this is a lot of work, and it's challenging and it's hard. And if it's about a decision about where you're going to get your coffee in the morning, it doesn't really matter necessarily. You're one person getting a coffee, that's fine. But if it's about something bigger, like a purchase that you're going to make that's going to potentially support an organization you might not align with, or it's about a decision you're going to make and you're using AI to write something for you, just taking the time on things that are going to have a bigger impact in your day or your week or your year or someone else's, when you know that there's a decision that's being made for you that is large scale, check multiple angles to make sure you have the information that you need. And this for me comes down to even buying a backpack for a Euro trip. I think I know what backpack is good for me, but I'm also being marketed to from 8 different angles. So I'm going to look up.
I bet your feeds are brimming with backpacks right now. And once they realize that you want a backpack, oh my God, people that want a backpack also wanted all these other things. So you are getting every travel gimmick you could think about right now being marketed at you.
I absolutely am. Do you know how many pairs of merino wool pants I have been they're you should have merino wool socks, and then you should have this lightweight, and I don't need it.
You're one purchase away from the best trip ever. We all know how that works.
Yeah. Exactly.
And we're talking about purchasing. Let's not also forget geopolitical views, socioeconomic views, our belief structures that we believe are our own, which often can be the biggest myth out there. It was implanted, it was influenced. And you said something in your talk, they don't try to throw it all out. They don't try to convert you in a week. It's slow. It's a slow drip over months.
Holes. No, it's a rabbit hole. Right. So and I think everyone can relate to the simple experience of, and maybe not everyone can relate to, but people who spend a lot of time on YouTube can relate to. You put on a video. You're kind of paying attention. It goes to the next video. You didn't pay attention to it skipping. You're cooking dinner. You're doing something else. And then suddenly in the background, you're like, how the F did I get to this? And you'd be shocked at how easy it is to radicalize a person over the span of a few months. And we saw this happen. We have tangible evidence convicted in court of this happening with Cambridge Analytica, and how Facebook and the videos that were on Facebook, thanks to Cambridge Analytica's marketing, shaped elections, created coups, overthrew governments. This happens and is happening daily, because you see one video and you're like, yeah, whatever. But he had one good point, and then another video comes on. You're more familiar with the person. It's the standard foot in the door phenomenon. It's how someone goes from being willing to put a tiny little lawn sign of a political of a political
Candidate
person.
leaning.
Thank you.
Yeah, candidate.
Yes.
Sarades,
Yeah,
candidate. I got it.
yeah. They put the candidate's little tiny lawn sign in their yard one year, and then 5 years later, somehow they've got this billboard in their front yard, and you're like, how did this happen? I didn't even care about the party that much until now. And it's that slow trickle. And because we live in echo chambers and confirmation bias areas, where like essentially what you see online is what they know will keep you more engaged, it just creates this familiarity, this comfort, and then they throw something really drastic from the other side in there, and you're like, oh, I'm angry now, and anger keeps you in that sphere. This is why I deleted my Facebook. And it just keeps building and building and building until suddenly you have an entire set of views that 5 years ago you didn't align with necessarily. And this happens to all of us, and it's not necessarily, it's in no way an indication of how, if someone being weak-willed or someone not knowing their stuff, but it's the influence that technology has had. And this is what I'm talking about when I say, like, I'm studying behavior modification. I'm looking at how did we get here from something as simple as watching one ad about backpacks, and then suddenly it's like, oh, well, maybe if I watch the wrong ad about backpacks, I'm actually watching things about being a prepper, and now I'm getting ready for an apocalypse that may or may not be happening. You know what I mean? Like, the way that spirals is rapid and not necessarily noticed because you're a frog in water and the pot is starting to boil and you've been in it for so long you don't notice.
It's so interesting when you think about also just the sheer, like, so many people I know are looking to grasp for an understanding because they're so overwhelmed, because there's so much. It feels out of control. It feels like I can't be influenced. I don't have agency on my own life. So therefore I look for things that make sense, like conspiracy theories. And it's, like, there's so much of that. It's when you're striving for, holy shit, I feel like I have no agency, I'm out of control. Well, how could I? The Illuminati's running the show. And you're like, what? Where did that come from? But there's sometimes can be this degree of like, oh, well, clearly I had a choice. Like, it was so much bigger than scarier than me. And thinking about even the accountability around this, you have to really look at it the way you just laid it out, as a bigger, broader, because each one is just a small little drop, or it's one notch on the stove, because no one just turned it to high right away, right? They turned it one notch at a time. So it's easy to overlook it. It's creeping into the house.
It is.
Calls coming from inside the house. Or I'm dating an old horror movie, but
like, this is something that I struggle with, because when you think about this too much, or you spend too much time thinking and playing in this space, it gets so overwhelming. And suddenly you're like, well, nothing matters because I have no control over anything.
Flip the desk over.
Yeah, exactly. Move to the woods. But that's not the answer, because we've never really had control over anything, if you really think about it. Even if you go back to most of this technology, we were ruled by the weather. Right? We were like, there's always something greater that we
let's not talk about when the printing press came to play and the role that played in influencing large swaths of people. Like, this isn't, we're just doing it now at a scale I don't think we've ever seen, but the phenomenon I think is just cycling its newest version, personally.
And exactly. This is the same thing that's always been happening, but it's just happening in a different way than we were used to, which it was different then too than what we were used to.
Yeah.
So what we can do is control what we can. And this is where it comes back to the students in the classroom and saying, all right, what can you do today to be a good digital citizen? Can you fact check something before you like it or upvote it? Can you make sure before you share something that you've looked up a couple different sources to see whether or not it's real? Can you do the right thing, whatever that means for you?
From a values perspective.
From a values perspective in this moment. And that can help shape, and like, can you put people first? And this is, I think, the moral of my talk, and like the moral of most of the things I do is, can you put people at the center and people first? When you're sharing an image, are you sharing something that was AI created or something that's actually the people in the situation that you're trying to share about? Are you looking and supporting humans and human stories, or are you supporting corporations and organizations that are pumping out this AI generated
a narrative? They're creating a narrative.
Yes, exactly. So that comes down to it, is just doing your best every single day to put people at the forefront of your decision making.
And based on the simple pace of this, the only thing we can be accountable to is our own role in it, because lawmakers and regulators, it's not going to be fast enough. Like it's already too late. Like from that perspective, it does require us as individuals to, yet we are busier than ever, more distracted than ever, and we get on autopilot, right?
Exactly, which is a part of the big scale spinning wheel that this is. So for us, like if we're saying, okay, organizations have to hold themselves accountable, obviously they're not really going to, but we can hold an organization accountable by choosing to interact with their product or not.
With our wallets, right? Ultimately.
Exactly. I mean, with what limited power our wallets have in the current state of the economy, right? So
less than they did a few years ago, but yes, you're right.
Yeah, exactly. And it might feel futile, but it's doing what we can with what we have, which is all we've ever done. So,
and this is just the latest version of the journey we've been on, from the printing press to the weather to what your neighbors told you, what gossip happened at the local coffee shop. Yeah. From the perspective of, as something I think maybe you've learned too, maybe heard from someone else, but the people that are telling us to be the most cautious about AI are often the people that are behind it, whether that's Musk or Alton or whoever. Like pick the figure that's being raised to godlike status, deity status in our society.
Would love to know the women behind them that are actually doing the work, but yes.
Yeah. Wow, there's some good. Yeah, I've read some. Yeah, I'm trying to think of the code. What was about all the women behind at NASA back in the moon launch? That was a great movie. But yes, back to your point about biases and who gets portrayed in the media. But how concerned should we be about the fact that the people that are somewhat behind some of this are the ones sometimes also telling us to be the most concerned, but yet we march forward anyways? It's, hey, don't push the red button, as they're back there pushing the red button.
This is something that's super fun, because all of this is such a wonderful PR moment for them, isn't it? Because if you're creating something and you have the power to shape said thing, because you have billions of dollars and a sphere of influence and an organization that's doing it, and you choose to come out and say, oh, people shouldn't be doing this. Like, I think the need for a mirror in some people's homes that shows them an honest reflection, and not and not, some sort of magic filtered mirror, which is what they appear to be freaking looking at, needs to exist, right? Because it infuriates me when I see the heads of major organizations being like, we shouldn't be doing this. And then within the same breath, here's our new product that is engaging in these practices. That's also large scale organizations and hypocrisy, right? So I'm not sure that that's a problem that we, the citizens, can solve, short of, not necessarily looking at these people as God kings. But
fair enough.
But you know what? If I had a couple $1 billion, I assume I would be a God king too. So
power corrupts, absolutely, right? It's also, you write confidential on something, I'm going to want to look at it. So you guys should never use this. But here's our latest release. You might want to check it out. You might be curious. Let's talk about, because this is quite the conspiracy. Well, not even, I shouldn't say that. This is a very real conversation we've had. Let's talk about the potential positives to humanity. Like, as someone who puts humans at the center, like, let's not go for a 40-minute rant and only talk about, oh my God. Let's talk about the level setting, the access to things that maybe certain groups haven't had before. There's some positives in here for sure.
Oh no, there absolutely are. There absolutely are. I mean, the few that come to mind immediately are within the medical sphere. Want to talk about a field that's, tied down by bureaucracy. I mean, this is the opportunity to optimize patient symptom recognition and being like, oh my gosh, you didn't think of this, but here's all of the symptoms and here's what we know. And here's a potential direction we can look for diagnoses, and it can support doctors and professionals. Computer vision is phenomenal potentially at identifying, in x-rays, where something might be wrong before a human eye could notice it, right? Or looking at an MRI and saying, hey, there's a spot here and we should watch it. That has such potential to save lives.
What a perfect example of the augmentation of the expert, and just, there's only so much you can process as an individual mind. Add this huge piece of horsepower behind you, and then your 10 years or 20 years of experience on top of that. Now that's the level of care I would hope to get in that situation.
Exactly. Yeah. That's phenomenal. And then even with language translation, these GPT models that I've critiqued for the last 45 minutes are when you actually take that, you break it down, you say, okay, so if I take this this model and I'm able to use it with different languages, it can contextualize them because it actually understands to a degree some nuance, some understanding of like what language should be, so that you're not just getting a Google Translate or the old Google Translate, like, okay, this word means this, so this means this, and then you end up with something that doesn't really make sense because it didn't make sense in the grammar or the context of the conversation. So as a translation, like as a mode of translation, phenomenal. And that's just one small area, but then also access to information that people didn't necessarily have, that people weren't necessarily going to be able to reach or see. And even in areas like self-driving vehicles, which eventually could be, exactly, could be great if they didn't hit pedestrians, but like there's different places where
I'll go back to the trolley example, and there's 3 people on the track, and do you divert? You kill the family? It's really always comes back to that dialogue, right?
It really does. But yeah, there are so many areas where AI is making such an astronomical difference, where people couldn't necessarily identify all of this data and actually see the trend or pattern in our lifetimes without its assistance. It can help with predicting different areas for climate change or for adjusting crops, because it's able to actually say, okay, well, all of the information around the soil, this, it can help farmers there. Like, it can help people in a bunch of different industries if trained correctly and if given the right like space to flourish. And I say this as help people, not replace people, because our decision making again still comes from that unique perspective.
Yeah. And I think it's still up to us. Are we going to outsource all of our decisions, or are we going to look at everything going, great, this is an extra piece of information, I still need to take a critical lens to it, which I think is the underpinning theme of everything we talked about. Yeah. Don't forget the you in the equation as well, right? Let alone the other.
Human in the loop, right? Like, pay attention to the human in the loop and make sure that it's you. And I know people
Make sure it's you. Make sure it's you. I love it.
Like, I know people who go throughout their day and use AI for so many of their decisions, and they don't even realize it. Like, everything from, hey, I won't say the name of the phone or device, but like, hey, so what's the weather like today? Hey, this, like, should I do this? Like, what recipe can I make with these things in my fridge? Every single decision is in some way or shape or form influenced by or augmented by like AI, which is wild, but they're not including their own preferences and decision making. And I'm like, okay, no, like, really put yourself in there.
Well, I've read, it was a few years ago, I think I saw an interview with Yuval Harari, and he said very bluntly, like, AI is the new God. It's so easy to outsource our decisions. And, I love his controversial statements, specifically around religion. He loves to poke at that, which he always then backs it up in a very articulated way. And I quite enjoy his. But that thinking about, when's the last time you got directions without really thinking? He goes, is that not outsourcing to a higher power to get to a certain place? And he made the parallel of God, AI, but more in the reflection of how we engage with that external viewpoint versus being critical. And I was like, it landed for me, and it still lands as I talk to you today. It comes up.
And you see it in how we visualize AI, right?
Yes.
Like, visualize AI, and you're always going to get the 2 hands reaching, right? The creation of Adam. You get, that is the image that comes out with one robotic hand and one human hand every damn time. And I'll emphasize again what the human hand looks like, because it's the same in all of the pictures, and it's always that same hand.
Yes, it is. Yes, well said. Yeah, I got you.
But it's like we are looking at this as a who is the creator moment, and it definitely is an outsourcing of decisions and morality that I just want to stress people should not necessarily outsource. Maybe make your own choices. But
it's so goddamn easy. It's so goddamn easy to outsource. Like, if I think of the barrier is that it actually is easier to do it than not do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
The friction is me taking time to think. And that's scary as F.
Exactly. So take your 30 seconds on the big important issues. It's only 30 seconds. Don't worry. AI's already saved you 10 minutes. You can take 30 seconds of that and do what you can to get yourself the most information possible. AI is making this decision with huge swaths of information. The least you can do is get yourself a small corner of that.
Do you even recommend, like, put something in the ChatGPT, put it into Gemini, put it, like, even playing around with different, like, because they all have a bias. They've all been created from someone with an agenda, with a different scope. Or I've noticed similar but not. And I'm just trying to play around with an experiment, right? My own like armchair stuff.
I mean, I would even say, and like have fun with this later. Pick a prompt, any prompt, you put it in, and get someone else from their account on a different device to put in the same prompt.
Okay, yeah.
We did this at my second talk at the Science Center. No one's getting the same answer. No one gets the same answer to why is the sky blue.
Was that literally the question? Why the sky's blue?
Yes.
Like that binary,
yes.
or that like there is
yes.
one might think if you subscribe to a certain series of the Earth is spherical and all the things of why that is true.
Yes, and we all get something. Like we all get an answer that could be seen as true to some degree. Some received a haiku as a response. Others received an academic essay as a response. Some received bullet points. And some received a hypothetical question in return. It all depends on how you've engaged with the internet and ChatGPT. Because it's based on your data.
Is the error expecting there be? Because if I could ask 5 people, depending on the question, I might get 5 different answers. That feels more true to the use case that 5 different instances of ChatGPT open on 5 different browsers with 5 different histories would be no different than me asking those 5 people if they didn't have access. So are we expecting universal truth where there maybe is never going to be one?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's something that I've noticed with people in general, because we put our trust in artificial intelligence, and use the air quotes, but like we're putting our trust in something that is individualized and tailored to us to give us what we want. It's like asking someone whose job it is to be a yes man a question. Like you're not going to get an honest answer, right?
Totally. I was at the Chug Wagons last night, super randomly, sitting beside a guy that I just met through another friend. So we had we don't know each other, but you're friends with so-and-so. So we started chatting about something. He's like, we could Google it. I'm like, let's just focus on the rest of the night of who can speak the most confidently. He's like, okay, let's do that. And we just started playing around. He's like, what do you think about this? I'm like, well, this is what I think. He's like, oh, that sounds pretty believable. That actually is more truth. That actually is more telling than it is not, right? We just did it for fun because we're both old enough to go, I remember the good old days when it was just who had the more bold answer would be trusted. He goes, let's play that. He goes, don't pick up our phones. I'm like, dude, I'm so in.
Super fun.
And it was a good time. And it was so ridiculous, but yet we weren't too far.
That's basically what ChatGPT is though. Right. And I see that when our students try and use it to write their essays, because you can say something boldly, but when an expert is grading it and knows damn well what they're talking about, and you've submitted something that is confidently wrong,
what happens in 10 years when all those experts have now been trained? Like that student becomes a teacher.
I do not want to think about it. That is the one.
I promised we'd finish positively, but I'm not. I'm screwing that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, the mentorship, the apprentice, the learning through experience, the being on a job where you can shadow somebody who's been there for 20 years, especially in professionally designated roles. That's a huge, risky proposition.
It's fine. I'm fine.
Fine. Freaked out, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. Isn't that what
FINE
stands? Isn't that what FINE stands for? I felt that captured it perfectly.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Before we go down a deeper, darker rabbit hole,
okay,
Lauren, thank you so much for just coming on and just literally shooting the shit, old-fashioned style.
Thank you.
I didn't fact check anything you said. I just took it as a good conversation, and that's okay.
And I said it confidently, so we can just assume it was true. Yeah. Thank you so much, Tyler. It was always a pleasure. I love these conversations. Hey, if someone wants to, hey, what if I wanted to sign up and end up in one of your classes? What would I do? Do I have to be in a certain program? I believe so. That's I'm putting you on the spot. I'm putting you on the spot. You are. I actually don't know within the context of this, and maybe one day I'll do some sort of public engagement based class based on some of my research. We'll see. Okay. So I go to check out Mount Royal. If I end up in a program, I may be fortunate enough to find myself in your classroom, which sounds like a lovely experience where they are held captive by your ideas for a period of time. Yes. While absolutely. You teach them to fact check everything you say. It's an interesting dichotomy, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Lauren, thank you so much. And you're on LinkedIn, and I encourage anyone to reach out if they're open to it or curious. Love my conversations with you, and I love your brain. It makes me so joyful to chat with it. Awesome. And all the things that it entails. Well, thank you so much, Tyler.